welcome to the Old Man Orange podcast. I'm Spencer Scott Holmes.
And I'm Ryan Dunnigan, and today we have a very special guest on the show.
Hey guys, my name is Newton Lilavois. I'm the creator of Crescent City Monsters. Currently it's a webcomic, but we're running a Kickstarter to actually print chapter 1 right now.
And Crescent City Monsters, like I know I've mentioned this on the podcast for about, I don't know, I guess about the last year or so. I remember I discovered it when you were on like page 12 or 11 or something like that. We ran into each other on Twitter, and then it's just like, hey, you want to check out my comic? I'll check out your comic. And we just kind of connected from that point on. And then even if I have my video on, I actually have that poster that I won from you on my back wall. So whenever anybody's on the podcast, they always see it.
Oh, yeah, that's great. Yeah, I totally forgot about that poster. I think that was page 7 or something. Or was it the first page?
No, it's like page 8 or something, because it's the part where once the little kind of troll creatures come by, and then he...
The Grunch.
The Grunch. And then he summons all the snakes behind the motorcycle, and it's kind of like popping over. There's like cobras and stuff. It's that one.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that was a pretty cool one.
Oh, it's really awesome. And I mean, like, I've always just said, like, I've told people this whole time, it's like, man, if there's a comic you gotta check out, Crescent City Monsters. The artwork, if anything, will blow you away. It's just that awesome. And I've loved it this whole time. I can't wait. I pre-ordered on your Kickstarter the single issue, like, physical copy of it. And I bet you that's gonna be amazing once in print.
Great, yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, the artist is Gian Carlo Bernal. He is amazing. He's got to be one of the best artists around, not just in indie comics, but just in general. His grayscaling work is amazing.
Well, I love a lot of his character design, just the way how the band looks, the way how Jonas looks, just like I think he does a good job of balancing out, like making it look cool and stylish, as well as making it look really creepy and scary with some of the monsters, and like a lot of the horror images that you use, like when all the snakes that are coming out of the cop's mouth and ears and all that.
Yeah. It's I'm glad you mentioned that, because the first few pages, I was like, wow, Gian is really great. He's an amazing artist. But that scene with the snakes, I was kind of a little worried, because I was like, man, can he pull this off? Can he make it seem like, can he make it seem realistic, scary, and not too overdone at the same time, but he did such a great job at pulling that scene out. I mean, if you think about it, when you look at that, there's an incredible amount of snakes coming out of this guy's mouth, but it doesn't look like it's like something that's just overdone. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I see what you mean, because like it doesn't have like, though there's copious amounts of detail in the work, but you never get that kind of like lost in the lines. Because sometimes you get some kind of art, and it like, even if it looks really good, but there's almost like so much lines and so much detail now that you almost kind of lose sight of what's kind of going on. The balance here is really awesome.
Yeah.
Now
Gian did a really.
I was just gonna say, where did you find him at? I think you mentioned this before on the Comic Central podcast, but.
Yeah, I found him at a DeviantArt, I believe. Wait, no, take that back. I always say that. So I think I first saw him as an artist on one of the Kickstarters I had backed. I think it was The Last Days of Kevin. It was either Ronin or The Last Days of Kevin. He had drawn both of them, but I can't remember which one it was. And so then when I saw him again on DeviantArt, I was like, oh, okay, this is the dude that did The Last Days of Kevin. And I reached out to him. I asked him to do a couple of commissions, and one of them was a monster. So because since the theme is monsters, I wanted to make sure that the artist really had an eye for drawing monsters and really liked drawing monsters. And when he came back with this this version of the Grunch, the original Grunch, the Grunch that we have now is a lot different than the original version.
Mm-hmm.
So he came back and he just knocked it out the park. I mean, I should make it a one of the stretch goals, because the original Grunch, the monster itself is really amazing. But once I saw that, I was like, this is the dude right here. This is the guy I need to be working with.
Oh yeah, most definitely. It's like that kind of artwork. Like I would not even say it's indie. It is like as professional as you can get. Like indie would almost be like not that there's anything against indie, but like that almost feels like if you told somebody that they'd be like, oh okay, so it's gonna have a little bit of a homemade look. It's like no. It tops a lot of those Image and Dark Horse books and even Marvel and DC stuff. Like it's got just a great look and it just draws you in instantaneously. There's no way that from page one that you're not ready to go for this story. And then to top it all off, the story itself's amazing, the characters are cool, the monster design's fantastic. It's just an all-around awesome book.
Yeah, I really. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just saying thanks.
Oh, what I really like about the book is when you first open up on the house, you see some signs. You're like, I can't read that. Oh, whatever. It must be just scratched off or used up or whatever. And then as it goes on, like, oh, that's their spell. That's like whatever they pops up whenever they say a spell. And I like how it slowly progresses into becoming more and more fantasy based and horror based. First, like, okay, I'm just gonna go out and play with my band tonight. You don't worry about it. And like, all right, no magic. All right, no magic. And then the owls start talking to him. And I kind of like that you don't have the whole thing about like, oh, it's a talking owl. It's like one of those things like, oh, this guy knows the drill. He's been doing this. We're moving on. Oh, cool. And then when the cop pulls him over and, you did like fantastic job of just like wanting something horrible to happen to this cop right there. And then that shot is just such a great payoff when you see the amount of detail. Like, I think that's probably my favorite shot in the whole book. Just his mouth just jarred open with all the snakes falling everywhere. And then flies off. He's like, oh, that damn kid. Got me again.
Oh, darn meddling kids. Yeah, I'm glad you appreciate that because that's exactly what I was trying to go for. Because as I was doing the scenes, I wanted to establish first like his family life and his home life, and so I put a lot of thought into the house, how the house is gonna look. Even that post with the symbols. I was hoping that people caught that and, kind of like scratched their head and was like, what? This doesn't look like regular writing. What is that? And kind of just like notice that and pay attention. And then I wanted to kind of build on what's a normal world to Jonas, but kind of like show how different it is. So like that sign was one of them. The fact that he was talking to the owl and the raven is another, and just that conversation that they had also kind of I wanted to kind of establish like, okay, this guy he's going out and leaving his family, but there's a lot more to, he's no ordinary guy. There's a lot more to him in this situation than what's going on.
What I like about it a lot is it leaves enough to question. But I think sometimes when people try to establish a world, they spend too much time breaking down every little thing. And I like that it just gets enough across like, oh, okay, so he knows magic. Okay, there's something more to him. We don't know what that is yet, but I'm sure we'll find out. And because I think sometimes people just focus way too much on like, wait, how does that owl talk? Oh, you're special lineage. What do you mean? And I just like how this just blows past that and just like try to keep up.
Yeah.
I always think of sometimes like some of the 70s Marvel comics are kind of like that. They're like, well, let's stop and talk for a bit and explain what's going on. It's just like, especially some of the X-Men ones. It's like, okay, we could like speed this up just a little bit. It's got a great story going on, but we don't need an explanation of like why Nightcrawler's powers work the way they do every single moment. I know you're catching somebody up, but still.
Yeah. I try not to handhold the audience too much. I give them enough information so they understand what's going on, but only enough so they understand the scene, like and no more, because like you said, it kind of just like goes back to just, it's just a little too much information that you really don't need at that time, Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I like how it kind of just drops you off almost like in a day in the life. And then next thing you know, you're kind of going along and things happen and it's like, it doesn't ever stop for it. They just kind of, There's a story element. Oh, okay, cool. Animals talk. Oh, cool. Magic's here, and so on as it goes on. And then boom, all of a sudden the monsters come and problems arise. And now there's like, somebody's got to pay for something. And that's kind of how we get. And it's like in one issue, you get the perfect amount. You never felt like you were waiting. It wasn't like one of those ones where it's like nothing happened till the very end. No, the whole way through the pacing goes nice.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I really try to work on pacing because for me, I'm a fan of the slow burn.
Hmm.
So I like to kind of take my time to develop the stories. I'll even throw in a lot of panels where there's no dialogues or captions, if I feel like that's necessary. So the pacing is something that sometimes I worry about because I don't want to lose the audience. Because even though I'm a fan of the slow burn, I know not a lot of people have the patience for it. So I realize in the meantime that you have to kind of throw in things that keeps the audience kind of like interested in what's going on. So pacing is a real big thing for me that I really try to consider, or I take into consideration when I'm writing a scene or pages in the comic book.
Well, that always kind of like the slow burn always reminds me, like I call it like the 70s build up. Because a lot of films in that time period, like, they start off and maybe nothing really happened till about an hour into the movie. It was just kind of like dropping you in, here's the characters and so on. But as far as like the core story that you showed up for, like I'll use examples kind of like Halloween, the John Carpenter one. Great movie and all, but it's like one of those ones like it does have that hour long of you just kind of hanging out with the characters, which is kind of cool in itself, because then when stuff does go down, it becomes like, oh, everything just kind of changed on us really quickly, where, you could do it also the opposite way, is to do the 007 thing, where you start off with action right off the bat. You don't even know what's going on anymore, and then it's just this cool scene, and then you start exploring up the story and so on.
Yeah. There's a few ways of doing things. I mean, I guess it all depends on the story itself,
Now, can I ask a question? And if you don't want to answer, it's totally fine, because I might go into spoilers. But we see the rest of the band here. Does the rest of the band, do they have powers, or will they get powers, anything like that?
Oh, wow. It's funny that you mentioned that, because I was thinking about the rest of the band just today, because as I was doing an exercise where I was doing a lot of background building. Like I was actually going into like, Jonas's great grandfather, father, things like that. So I was really building a world for Crescent City Monsters, even all the way back to the past. And so one of the things, as I was looking at Jonas's world, I was thinking about his friends and family, and then I started thinking about his friends, and I was like, to answer the question, I don't know. I haven't really established anything yet, but anything's possible. Because as I was thinking through Jonas's relationships with his friends, Tree and Sticks, I was thinking like, wow, the concept is kind of cool too. Just three bandmates or three guys who were getting into music, New Orleans at that time, and Jonas has powers and maybe his friends don't, but maybe they have some special skill set, or they bring something and they get into their own little adventures. And I was kind of thinking of a spin-off with that. But right now, no, there's no, I haven't really established a real deep history for his bandmates, but that's definitely something that I want to get into.
Well, that just sounds like a cool idea.
Dynamic they had.
I like the idea of just like almost like the whole band, almost like maybe if they don't have powers yet, they can almost even learn them as time goes on. Maybe Jonas and like his mother and everything can like pass on some maybe knowledge, and maybe they're not nearly as strong, but they have like, yeah, just kind of different abilities. That just sounds kind of cool in itself. I didn't even think about that till Ryan brought it up.
Yeah. Maybe maybe Jonas's friends have specialized skills.
Something I thought was interesting was once the Grunch popped up, I just kind of went on Google for a second to see, is this something he kind of made up, or is this some urban legend type stuff? And I saw they were like more or less the New Orleans version of the Chupacabra. Will we, once again, I don't want to ask for spoilers if you don't want to give them, but will we be seeing like other monsters and other creatures from mythology or lore popping in possibly?
Yeah.
Awesome. So
I was doing research for specific New Orleans legends and monsters, and the Grunch popped up. The weird thing is, when I did a Google image search to kind of find a reference for them, there wasn't really anything good out there in terms of like establishing how they really look, which was weird. You would think like there was like pictures out there. There were, but it wasn't anything that you could like. The description of the Grunge was kind of all over the place, So at first I kind of made them lizard-like, right? But as I went on, I realized, like, you know what? I need to change them because when I was reading the origins of the grunge, they said that the grunge originated from a combination of albino and small people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as I was thinking about it, I was like, you know, I need them to kind of reflect that kind of history. So then we ixnayed the original design of the grunge, and we went with what you see now, which to me made a lot more sense and was easier to play with in terms of giving them a storyline. Because now, once again, Gene did a really good job at designing them, and then when he did Queenie, I was like, this is excellent. So as soon as I saw Gene's rendition of the new grunge, my imagination started sparking. I already came up with a little backdrop history of how the grunge are, and they're gonna play an important part going on, and so you're gonna definitely see a lot more of them.
I just love how creepy they look. They just have the whole like crazy hillbilly thing going on. After reading this, it makes me want to go on to. Do you know the podcast Lore?
Sounds familiar. I listened to a lot of podcasts. I might have heard one or two episodes.
It's like this horror podcast. Each episode's around 20 to 30 minutes, and they break down different parts of mythology and history, whether it be kind of like, oh, this is where this is the story of vampires, so they got started, or whether it be a creepy urban mystery or urban legend about a serial killer, or whether it be like it's a slow week throwing a ghost story. It makes me. They had like one on Mothman, so I'm kind of like, oh, now I'm wondering if they have one on the Grunch. I'm really curious about that now. But they're never really just named vampire episode. It's always something clever, like bitey neighbors or something like that. So it's like, okay, I gotta read between the lines and figure that out now.
Huh.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of monsters, there's a lot of there are things I want to do with the monsters from Crescent City Monsters, because you know, when everyone thinks of New Orleans, they always think of vampires, right? And werewolves. So at first I was kind of against, like, you know what, I'm gonna have, you know, a few vampires, maybe some werewolves, but I'm not really gonna make them all too important. But then that became hard because I'm a big werewolf fan, and I like vampires. So what I decided to do is include them in the story, make them major characters, but try to do it in a way that's a lot different than what you would normally see with your typical vampires and werewolves.
Well, no, that sounds like kind of cool one, because you could just sort of bring that in way later on. Is, you know, you almost could savor that. It's like, hey, we'll put these in the way and hold them up. Is you got the vampires, you got the werewolves, but you can always bring those out later. Be like, boom, here you go. But it's not right off the bat. So at least it feels, because I think by not really having that, it has a very fresh and completely different feel. Because, you know, the grunge, it's just like, well, one's like, I've never seen a story with them before. So I feel like you're really breaking new ground just by having a storyline. I mean, probably if you dig hard enough, maybe somebody's mentioned them in a comic book at some point or something like that. But I just have never seen that. Not in a movie, not in a TV show or anything.
Yeah. I've never seen them either. And it's funny. I've been approached by a few New Orleans. They've said, I've never heard of grunge either. And I actually was born and I live here.
Huh. So weird how it can be. It's just that hidden of a legend.
So regarding other monsters you plan on using, is it? So I'll be honest, the only ones I really know about was werewolves and vampires, and I know there's other things in the South, like, you know, I think Maryland has the pig lady or something like that, and I want to stay somewhere in Virginia. They have like Mothman, but beyond that, though, a lot of the stuff more in the South kind of got by me. What's some other ones you plan on bringing on?
Well, I was thinking about it, and one of the things I wanted to do was having some sort of sea creatures, because the Mississippi River is right there, and there, Louisiana is right there by the water. So, I figured like, hey, it seems natural to have some kind of water monster, right? Water related monster. So I definitely want to do that. And because they're close to the bayou, I want to create a couple of monsters that are like related to the bayou area also. So those are a couple of the interesting monsters that I'm thinking about adding to the story.
Well, if anything, it just sounds like
a way to mix it up.
Yeah, it just sounds like you got all kinds of choices of what you can use in there, and just the scenery itself. Great looking place as always to kind of like have any story happen. But now, how long has this process been for this issue? As I said, I know that we met, a year ago, it seems like by now or something like that. And I know that it's just been, you know how kind of creative projects go, but when did you first start putting this together?
Started, I think April of last year. So It's been over a year. Yeah. It took about 8 years. No, not 8 years. I'm sorry. It took about 12 months to do the 26 pages that you see online right now. For the past few months, we've kind of been on a break, but we're definitely going to pick up the pace once the Kickstarter is over and done with.
And now, at this point, where's that Kickstarter at? Because that thing has just climbed real quick.
Right now, let me take a quick look. Let me go online and see where it is. Last time I checked, it was over 4,000. We just hit over 4,000. Okay, so we're at $4,038.
Wow, I'm just so impressed at how fast that went up. I mean, in 2 days,
nice work.
It was already over 2,000. It seemed like in 48 hours.
Yeah, we were funded in less than 48 hours, which was really cool.
I thought I jumped on there early, and I was already like a couple hours behind, and you were already above 100 at that point.
Yeah. It was that was really exciting. That was overwhelming. That was an awesome feeling. To know that so many fans and really it was a lot of people who already knew about the project that pushed it to that amount. It wasn't really a lot of new readers to the webcomic who pushed it to the amount. I would if I had to guess, I would say at least maybe 70% of it was fan based. Mm-hmm. So that was really great.
I'm just curious because there's all those. There's the Indiegogo and Kickstarter page to see explaining what the thing is, and seems like 80% of them have the ukulele and the whistling. We're here to introduce you to an amazing new project. I'm just trying to imagine that version of that for this right here. But congratulations on that, though, man.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, did you guys get a chance to watch the video on the Kickstarter page?
I watched
actually didn't get a chance to see it.
I actually, like, the second I saw, I just pre-ordered, but then I went back and watched it later on because I'm like, I want to see what his video is, actually, out of curiosity for a comic book.
Yeah,
Does it have the ukulele?
No, it's like it's like out in the woods, and I kind of like this. The camera's like spinning around, and it's like black and white. It reminds me of almost like an old movie we would have shot like in high school, like that kind of look. It's like, let's go out to the woods and shoot something.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I kind of was going for. That what's that movie? I forgot what it was called. It was maybe this was like 10 years ago. Was it Blair Witch? Yeah, the Blair Witch Project.
Oh, Blair Witch.
That kind of yeah. I wanted to kind of go for that feeling of the Blair Witch Project in the intro. But yeah, that was like my third time doing the video, because that was the third version because I had different versions, and the other versions I was kind of like sitting down like, hey guys, my name is Newton, and but I was like, oh man, this video really doesn't feel like me. So I said, I just took my iPhone and a selfie stick, and I went to like a local park, and I was like, you know what, let me just do it here, and then I'll make it in black and white, and so and it turned out pretty good. I was happy with it.
No, I like that video out a lot because I was just doing research for future Pizza Boys ideas and so on. I was just like, oh, I want to see what Newton's video is. Let's see what this is all about. I was like, I like the simplicity of it, and it was just like, it wasn't just the like, hey everybody, buy my book, you know. It was just like, oh, this is kind of cool. It's got kind of a creepy atmosphere. Almost feels like you're supporting like a small film, if anything.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. That reminds me. You guys had I forgot what was it, chapter 3 or 4? You guys Pizza Boys. They were filming, right? That was one of your issues about, right? They actually went out and filmed the indie movie.
Yeah, that was issue 4 because that's me and Ryan for 14 years or so. That's what we did. We just shot all kinds of movies like that. So I'm like, let's just do a story about like how it kind of really goes down.
Yeah, that was like one of my favorite chapters because for a time I actually really was thinking about creating a web series on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to kind of just get into directing and writing. For a while I was really into it, but due to resources and time, I never really got started with that. But it's definitely something that I want to try to do in the future. It'd be great to do like a little web series.
Oh yeah.
Best thing I can recommend for that is just keep the cast very minimal. That's the thing I can. Not that I don't like people. People are fine, but it's hard to rely when you got a big cast. And as you look at the stuff Spencer and I did, movie-wise, it went from being more people to less people to two of us talking into a microphone.
Yeah, it's just one of those ones, like, I love making movies, but that was always the hardest part. It just seemed like the second that you kind of got to a certain point, there were so many people that they like the idea of making movies, but they don't want to put the time and effort into it, and that's what made it kind of tough. And then that's where me and Ryan, we just switched to doing animation, because it's like, hey, we can do all the characters, and we can do all the work ourselves, and we technically don't need anybody else, so it just made it sort of easy. And then comic books, I feel, is like almost like even another step of like simplifying it just a little bit more. Just like you could get a story out in a decent amount of time. You could do it by yourself. You could do it as a team. You could do it as a tiny team. There's a lot of variables and nice options that I like about comic books just for that reason alone.
Yeah, you're right. If you're a writer and an artist, you've got the best of both worlds. You just do everything yourself, right? Or if you're just a writer working with artists, even that's still not bad because it's just you two. But yeah, you're right. It's very difficult once you have more than 2 people to just start working with a lot of people and coordinating things. And like you say, sometimes people they lose that inspiration, or they lose that energy that they first had, and so things slow down. They don't take it as seriously as they did before, and yada yada. People aren't always as dependable as you'd like them to be.
Yeah.
So
especially when you pay them in beer and pizza.
And the one thing I'll say about like with your kind of team up you got going on Crescent City Monsters, what I like about like the writer and the artist thing is that the artist can focus 100% on just working on the comic book and nothing else, where the writer can go out and be like, oh, I can promote, I can market, I can make all these kind of like neat little advertising campaigns and so on, that like if you're kind of doing it all yourself, you almost got to do the thing where you switch gears, where it's like, okay, I'm drawing today, let's see, tomorrow I'm going to do some marketing, then I'll go back to doing some drawing, now I'll make some ads, and it's almost like there's something to be said about almost having that little bit of a separation of jobs.
Oh yeah, it definitely makes it easier. And the cool thing is, so when I write out the stories, I give Gene the pages 5 times. I give Gene the script 5 pages at a time. So he doesn't always know what's going to happen. So he's always like, he's as he's drawing it, he's asking me, oh, what's going to happen next? So it's for him, it's like he kind of goes through the same process as everybody else, but just a little bit earlier. And yeah, I give a lot of props to people who do both the drawing and the writing. I mean, that must take a lot of just mental energy. Because just writing by itself sometimes is difficult, because just to make everything feel right in the story is a lot of things that you go over in your head. And, you come up with this great idea, and then you come up with another great idea, but then you realize like, oh wow. They kind of clash, so I'll figure out which idea I'm gonna ixnay and which one I'm gonna keep. So it becomes hard, it's not as easy as it looks if you're doing it right.
Yeah, exactly. It is like its own process in itself. I mean, even like the way that I've always just kind of do writing is I almost just think about like I'll think about it like an issue of Pizza Boys for months on end. Sometimes I'm even thinking about them like early on, like okay, 2 issues from now I'm gonna do this. And as time comes on, I just write little notes, little notes, little notes here and there. Here's an idea, here's a joke, here's a story scenario. And I let it kind of build and sort of simmer. It's just simmering on in the background, and then by the time I finally come to write it, it's like I kind of got this good idea of like, okay, I think I know what it is. Let's just write it all down and just go for it because I've been thinking about it for so many months.
Yeah. I'm the same way. I simmer on ideas for a long time, for weeks at a time.
I notice when I write or draw, sometimes it's one of those things that gets me like, I'll come up with the idea, I'll break it down into a list of what I want to happen in that issue. And then I'll do a really rough, nasty, ugly-looking sketch that no one could probably understand but myself, but I have an idea of like, okay, that's that character, that's this character, that's happening here. And I don't actually write it until I start putting it out there, until I start actually finishing up, because I found myself like writing the scripts and then doing all this detail, and then I found out, my characters talk too much, and there's these giant word bubbles that take up a lot of the background. So then I'm like, all right, how do I condense this information within this page right here?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I guess that's an advantage, right? Because you could kind of like work out all the kinks before you finalize everything, right?
Mm-hmm. That's good too. Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. There are moments where I've kind of had to sacrifice. All right, do I sacrifice this cool drawing that took me a while to do, or do I actually sacrifice this important dialogue? So it's kind of give and take. I mean, I think I've gotten better at it as I've moved on. And I'll be honest, I haven't posted a comic in a while. This one I've been working on has been taking up a lot of time, but I'll get to it.
Yeah.
But I also want to ask too, because since you had such a good Kickstarter run, like what was your whole marketing strategy throughout the last year of just really getting the book spread out there, and going across the advertising? Because I always feel that in the comic book world is kind of like the lost art that people never seem to bring up so much. I mean, you can look for 1,000 books on how to draw, you can look for a good handful of comic books on how to write and things like that, but the marketing and just kind of like, because comic books is its own beast. It's similar to a movie, it's similar to an animation, but at the same time, it still has a completely different kind of like way you go about things.
Yeah. The one thing that I learned about marketing is half of what you're selling is only whatever the physical product is, the product or service. The other half is really yourself. So you really have to put yourself out there too. So normally I'm not the type of person who I'm an introvert. I'm not the type of person who's like, all right, what's the next podcast I'm going to do? I'd rather stay home and just chill. So I've learned like you really have to learn how to put yourself out there. And like I said, I'm an introvert. I'm not really the type of person who's like, hey, how's it going? And, introduce myself and all of that. But I've learned that, you've got to kind of put that to the side and just be yourself. Put all your whatever makes you self-conscious or whatever social anxieties you have, you're just going to have to kind of push past that. And like I said, just be yourself and just go out there and on social media, show your artwork, show your work, but at the same time, show a little bit of yourself too. So people get to know you because they'll love the product, but they'll even love it more if there's an actual human associated with it. That's why they always use sports athletes to sell sneakers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
there's an actual person behind that product. So that's one of the important things that I would suggest. And another more technical thing is build your own email list of really loyal and interested followers, not people forced to be on your email list. So even if you only have 50 people, just as these people keep opening your email and responding to you, that's good because you can always build from a strong base, you know. So those are the two quick things that I could think of in terms of marketing. There are a few more things, but we get this. The podcast might turn into 2-3 hour podcast if we go into that.
Yeah, that's the
I've
thing.
done that before.
The marketing aspect is such an animal in itself, and like I'm just trying to get like more and more into it because you think you got like an idea of it, but then next thing you know, it goes deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole.
Oh yeah, it does. And you're right. It's like it's always something that you got to learn. Like little things, like even copy, right? Or like let's say you put a post on Facebook, right? The words you use are important. You have to use to actually get people to like or connect to that or do some kind of interaction. Those specific words you use are really important. So it's not like you can just write anything you want and you'll actually get a response. Even on that micro level of just copy for social media text is important. So when you think that like every little thing that you do, say, and write has to be considered, there's a lot to learn.
Oh yeah, it's just especially when it gets down to like keywords and certain trigger words and how to kind of spread it out and just interacting. And I don't know, I've just learned myself too. It's just you can post your comic book and things like that, but then it's almost like if you got just kind of like your other interests that you can sort of put up there too, and it interweaves together where it's like, hey, I'm watching this movie. Hey, what do you guys think about this? And then, hey, here's this cool video game, and here's this other comic book I read, and then, by the way, here's my comic book, too, and then we kind of go back and forth.
Yeah, it's like you have to figure out a smooth way to engage them with regular conversation and, include some talk about your product.
And, what I've kind of learned, too, is that I don't know what it is, but something about a lot of times people that create comic books are not the most social creatures compared to like podcasting, and I'll even say like video and so on. Because I just noticed like I almost have to like when I'm talking about somebody's book and like I like to write a lot of reviews for them on like Comic Central and so on and try to help people out. But I noticed a lot of people, it's like it almost like blew their mind at that idea. Like, I mean, there was a point where I was asking people, I'm like, hey, I will literally go out and buy your book and review it. All you gotta do is come by and grab my book and so on like that. We'll just do a little review swap. And it was just like that. There was like people kind of stopped for a second, like, wait, what? What's going on? And a few people would reply to it, but not as much as like if I asked podcasts. If I went and asked a bunch of podcasts, be like, hey, I'm gonna do a listen and I'm gonna give you guys a review on iTunes or Spotify or anywhere like that. I mean, you would have like 75% of them jumping at that, if not all of them. And I feel like the people, if they missed it, it was only because they weren't online at the moment.
That's interesting. So you're saying podcasts are more extroverts?
Yeah, well, because podcasting just seems like it's everybody seems unless you get a podcast where people are kind of to themselves. Most of the time, everybody's so willing to help. It's a very like helpful, group oriented kind of area. I've noticed. It's just people want to jump on each other's shows. Everybody's spreading the word of their own show, but the group is a lot stronger. Where I don't know if comic books. I think everybody's kind of like a little bit more in that reserve state where they're working on their comic book at home, and then they wait. It's ready. It's out there. Okay, let's go back and let's do that again. Hopefully, people will see that one I just put out there, and they don't have that natural kind of like. I don't know. Podcast just feels like you sort of got to be kind of out there. I mean, I guess you can talk into your microphone all day long and never really talk to anybody else, but it's different how like you just kind of meet just different groups of people.
I feel like it kind of comes in waves because we'll have like a period where we will just be us bullshitting about whatever comic book or movie or whatever, and then we'll reach this point where we get a bunch of guests on right in a row.
Oh, I'm not talking about necessarily like on the podcast. I was thinking just like communicating on like Facebook
communicating
or
back and
Twitter
forth.
Or any of those kind of things. Yeah, like that kind of communicating back and forth. It's
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say it's like one of those ones like if we had something to share, you can always ask like the bunch of podcasts, be like, hey, do you guys mind sharing this? Boom, and it's like just seems a little bit quicker than sometimes like comic book artists. I don't know. This is what I've just noticed.
Mm-hmm. Well,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I wanted to say that I tend to notice that comic book creators are more of a reserved and introvert, so there might be something to what you're saying.
Yeah, and it's just like I just want to help spread the good word of like, indie comics and so on. So I think it's just fun just to read them and talk about them and like because there's just so much cool stuff out there. And I think just sadly enough it's just like I feel like nobody's really putting the like effort for certain books to like get them spread. So it's like, hey, if I can kind of help myself and if I see a book that I really like, I'm going to talk about it and I'm going to share it. And I'm going to try to help do my part. Because if I dig something, I really want like, hey, check this out. This is really awesome. Why not?
Yeah. And I appreciate all the support you've shown me. You've been really supporting me on Twitter, and so I really appreciate that.
Oh, no problem, dude. As I said, from like just the first time you shared the book, I think, I don't know, almost a year ago by now or something like that, I was just like, oh, this is something special. And I told Ryan about it, and I told other people about it, and and then you gave me the fantastic little like caption part on the back of the Pizza Boys graphic novel. So that is awesome in itself with the quote. And from that point on, it's just like, if I see your stuff, I'm always like, boop, retweeting that, sharing that, making sure that gets spread, And the cool thing, too, is I just noticed I've ran into other guys along the way that be like, oh, my gosh, dude, Crescent City Monsters is totally awesome. Just other comic book artists and so on that have run across that as time has gone on. So that's just cool in itself.
Yeah, and I meant everything I said for the quote in the back of your book. Your stuff is really funny, and I'm really into like really like gritty comic book stuff. Like lighthearted stuff is not my thing, but I mean I was laughing out loud when I read your stuff. I love the characters too, man. It reminds me of it's like when I read the issues, it's like a throwback to like the late 1980s kind of feel, like, you know what I mean? I don't know if I'm coming across, but like like in the 1980s you had all these like high school movies and movies about teenagers and all the crazy things that they did. So reading the series kind of reminds me of that.
Well,
gives me that.
It's when you say that, it's like the whole idea, like when I wrote Pizza Boys as a movie script, and me and Ryan worked on stuff together and so on. And the goal at first was to make it like a teen comedy, just like those 80s movies, just like the 90s and 2000 ones that were coming out at the time. And that was kind of the goal. And then it sort of got shelved for a while and we did all kinds of other projects. And then when coming back to comic books, I'm like, you know what? I could do something in comic books, just make the characters a little bit older and just kind of have one where it's more about like hanging out. It's got all my interests I like podcasting and comic books and classic movies and classic video games. And I feel with Pizza Boys is I really don't see anybody else out there with a book that's similar to that one. It's even it's even kind of hard for me to even like sometimes like because like a lot of comic books are comedy is almost so kind of rare in comic books. Oddly enough, I mean you got comic strips, but you don't have a lot of like comic books that are comedy as much.
Yeah. It's
to speak on both Crescent City Monsters and Pizza Boys, I think they're both pretty. And I'm not just saying this because I'm in one of them, but I think it says to both of them that like kind of first off, they're both black and white, and I think that it's something that comics really kind of need right now. Just because, don't get me wrong, I love Marvel and I love DC, but after a while, there is some stuff that when they try to get dark and there is stuff like, oh, wow, that got really fucked up. But a lot of the time, though, it feels very kind of like, I'm not really that worried because I know these characters are coming back. I know that they got a long franchise. Batman's been around for 80 years. So when someone dies, they're not really dead most of the time. So something like Crescent City Monsters, I'm not sure how long you want it to go on, if it's going to be an ongoing, long continuous series, if you have a couple graphic novels planned, but I really don't know what's going to happen. So I think series like that are really needed right now, and especially with the art design and the way it looks and just how sleek it is, yet it has that whole 1950s horror thing going on, and the monsters actually look terrifying. And where Spencer, like he said, there's not a lot of comedy, like he said, comic strips, but not a lot of graphic comedy comic books right now.
Yeah, that's true. I guess I think one of the things is it's probably hard to do that, to write comedy, and I actually have it be funny, as issue after issue. I guess because that's a real hard skill set, to make people laugh. That's I think to me that's even harder than like writing something gritty, so I think that might be the reason, like to really have a really funny book. It's probably a lot harder.
Yeah, I don't know. That could be the case, and I've heard that my whole life. My whole life, I've always heard that, like, oh, comedy's the hard genre to write, and so on, like that. And that always threw me off because I just remember just being like in high school, I'd be like, well, if we're gonna make a movie, we better make it comedy because if we try to make it serious, it's just gonna seem stupid. So we'll always have comedy elements in there. So I just got so used to doing that, and then I started meeting people from all other countries and stuff, and they'd be like, oh, like, well, yeah, comedy's the hardest genre. Like, what? Hardest genre? And they'd be like, well, what'd you make? And they'd be like, oh, here's this badass action movie I made. Oh, well, geez, we would have never thought to make that. We would have been like, oh, no way, that's gonna look cool.
Yeah. I guess it goes to show you that some things are easier to others, than I guess depending on your personality or the type of person you are, And I guess in your case, it's easy to make comedy.
Well, and I think too, like if I went to try to draw something serious just in my own art style, like I feel like that would be the hard sell. It'd be like, well, there's something serious going on, but it's got kind of goofy looking artwork, even though I'll say this, I have run across many books, that, you see in like an Image comic or somewhere like that have kind of maybe a little bit goofier artwork, but they have almost a serious story going on. And that almost could be a kind of a neat combo too at the same time.
Yeah, dude, you should do that. That would be crazy. Like if you had a serious like comic in your style, just like just take it, ultra seriously in your comic book. That might work.
It could be.
But then they'll be like, wait a minute, there's something to this.
I have this one friend who I wish he made it, but he backed out of it. He was a much better artist than I am, but he backed out of it. Like, I don't know. And I don't want to say the entire thing because I don't want to give his idea away, but he had this idea for the comic itself is very intense and very serious, but it was like a very obscure character. It was kind of like, think of Batman, but his gimmick was butterflies. And the thing is, he was just this dude that was just jacked, just ripped, and he was very dark and brooding and very serious. But his whole thing was butterflies instead of bats. And everything else is like a very dark, very bloody, very bleak comic. But it took itself totally serious, but it was also kind of satire at the same time. Like the comic itself was not aware of how absurd it is. Like it played it straight, but it was just this guy who essentially butterfly Batman. So,
that sounds like an interesting idea.
I think I've seen a couple of comics like that, and I know exactly what you're talking about. And done right, it actually works. So, but I think you really have to be a really good writer to pull that off.
I think that's the key thing. Is like one's got to balance out the other pretty well. So it's almost like you can have kind of funky artwork, but if you have really strong writing, it can kind of make up for it. And sometimes even a little bit vice versa can kind of go their way. Like you can kind of have a little bit funkier writing, but if you had like pretty good artwork, that could kind of make up for it. Now, granted, you kind of want to have it be a little bit more evened out than anything, but what I sort of like about the comics medium more than anything else is that almost anything works in it, as long as it's just a good story. Because I think about like books that I like. I mean, you can see some where like the artwork's pure amazing, and it's almost like I always use like Jim Lee as an example. It's like you look at Jim Lee and you almost go like, well, I don't even want to make comic books now. It's just so good. Like, why bother? But then you could see stuff where I always use like Scott Pilgrim. Scott Pilgrim is a perfect example. You look at that and you go, it is possible. It can be done. And it's just like, but they're both cool, like in like the exact same way, just different spectrums, and it all works. It's not like a movie where you're watching like a B or C movie and you're like, man, look at those cheap special effects.
Yeah. And what's amazing? Even artists like Scott Pilgrim, even though sometimes they draw simplified, in a simplified manner, when you really look at it, the artwork is really good, because it's like it's hard to make something that's simple look really good, and still come off. And sometimes these artists, like if that's just one style. If they really wanted to draw like some Picasso like thing or some realistic drawing, like the Mona Lisa, they could. So sometimes what you see them draw isn't really just like their level of skill.
Yeah, sometimes it's like they could just change it up. They can just do a little bit more of a cartoony look or something like that. Or I always use I look at Charlie Brown. Like that's always a good one just to look at every once in a while and just being like, you don't have to do too much. Just make the characters just very unique enough. But Charlie Brown's like sometimes there's not even like really backgrounds. It's like 2 lines and it's like Charlie Brown walking down the street and that's like it. And he's doing an inner monologue with himself and that's the whole comic. And sometimes it's just like to look at that kind of stuff and just go like, yeah, you don't always have to go as complicated as you want. But if you can, it's never a bad idea either. It's just that I think that's what's kind of cool about comics is there's so many different things and there's almost like nothing wrong you can kind of do. Everything sort of works as long as you got a cool story.
And to bring up, go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing.
And to bring it back around to indie comics, because right now one of the biggest movies that came out of the summer was Avengers: Infinity War, and people still like comics, people are still into comics, but people are starting to get a little bit more fatigued on superhero stuff, and I think indie comics right now are kind of telling stories that mainstream comics are not telling. So, I mean, they still may be superhero, but there's a lot of like genre and one. I think like Mark Millar. I think I'm so used to saying Mark Millar, but apparently it's pronounced Mark Miller. He apparently sold all his IP to Netflix, and they're gonna make Netflix movies and shows off nearly everything he's done. So it's kind of at this point like, oh, now they're going on to indie stuff I'm sure Marvel and DC will always be there, but they're now moving on to indie stuff. And regarding like art style, it's kind of interesting when you see something like Scott Pilgrim and you saw how simple the artwork was, but then how accurate it was to the movie.
Yeah, it matched well.
Yeah, I didn't realize Mark Miller sold his rights. I know he was in talks of producing the movie, his his comic books into film and TV, but I didn't realize he sold the rights to Netflix. That's bank right there. I'm sure he's definitely a millionaire right now.
Hire for the rest of his life right there. I mean, I'm hoping. I mean, I think Huck is getting a movie. I think Reborn, during the talks of that's the one I really want, Reborn. And then American Jesus, which I've never seen, but I was always curious, or never read, but I was always curious about.
Yeah. I think I think places like Netflix or there's platforms like Netflix, they're attracted to the indie comics because a lot of the indie comics aren't superheroes. They're a lot more than that. So it's easier to sometimes just put it on TV. You don't have to pay for guys flying around, special effects or anything like that. So, but still, you still have a great story that translates into TV. So, I think the indie world, if you really produce something that has a great story, and that's out of the norm, I think platforms like Netflix they'll start looking for IP to purchase. And I could definitely see that happening a lot more.
Well, and I think too that like there's gonna be because there's been kind of a while where like there's always superhero movies, but there hasn't been sort of like any like third party kind of comic book movies. I mean, the only thing I can think of last year was there was Atomic Blonde. That was like the one big one. But beyond that, there hasn't been a ton of them, like there was in like the 2000s to about the early 2010s. That's when you started having 30 Days a Night and Scott Pilgrim, and you had things like Wanted. And,
Two Guns.
Yeah, Two Guns. Like they were just taking books left and right from just all kinds of places that sometimes you didn't even know was a comic book movie until you saw the credits. I think it's going to come back around, though, and they're going to start being like, okay, superheroes are cool, and we'll keep those going and so on, but let's dip back into that other pocket, universe of all these other, whether they come from Image or Dark Horse or IDW, or they come from, like, true indie places where you start getting, the non-publisher type books, and they start pulling those ideas again and seeing what happens.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be an exciting, I think, next few years for indie creators, because I think a lot of what independent people are doing now is getting better. I think everyone's kind of just improving the craft, and so I think it's going to start building a bigger audience. And for indie people, we don't need billions of people. You just need to support yourself. You just need a few thousand people, hardcore fans, and you can make a living. So I think the more people that we have, the bigger the actual market for creating indie comics will be.
Yeah, and plus when you look at comics right now, a lot of mainstream comics are trying to almost mimic indie comics. I mean, I loved Matt Fraction's run on Hawkeye, but it was trying to be very indie with the whole style it had to it. And
yeah. I think Marvel and DC recognizes that. In fact, isn't DC supposed to? I think they're opening a new publishing line, right? That supports indie creators.
They used to have Vertigo, which was character owned, which is like DC got a small cut, but it was all character owned. And then Why the Last Man sold like crazy. And they're just like, oh, shit. Yeah, sorry. No, we're not doing the Image thing anymore. We're pulling back on that. So you get a slice, but not the whole pie. And now they have Young Animal, which is kind of linked to the DC universe. Like it shares a spot with DC, but it's kind of like what Vertigo used to be. But I don't know if it still has the whole creator-owned thing. I mean, because they still have Doom Patrol and other characters in there from old publications.
Yeah, Young Animal's just kind of that's just sort of like an offshoot of just DC. Are you saying that they got like almost like a submission section for like indie people to be like, hey, you can be under, almost like the way that kind of Image does it? Is that the idea?
I think we got static. Here we go.
Oh,
hi.
There we go. Little Skype error there, I guess.
Skype doing what Skype does.
But Newton, are you saying that there's almost like they're doing like a submission thing for DC, like where it's be like, hey, submit your work, your indie comics, and then you could be kind of almost, I guess, how Image sort of does it, or Oni Press or something like that.
Yeah, I thought maybe I misread it, but a couple of months ago I thought I saw an article about that. So, but I could be wrong. I thought that's what DC was saying.
I mean, I could see that nowadays, just kind of with like almost just, hey, we got this whole market, let's get a percentage of it, and why not? We're not getting that percentage right now, so even if we're only getting 20%, well, they'd probably take more than that. If Amazon takes, as much as they do, DC would probably take just as much too, but like they could kind of get 50% plus revenue of other people's books that they don't really have to work on.
Oh, that would be pretty awesome if DC started doing that. I'm going to look into that now.
Yeah.
Hypothetical question here I have for you, Newton. So let's hypothetically say that someone from Hollywood wants to make Crescent City Monsters. Would you prefer it be a movie, TV show, and if you could, what director?
Definitely TV show. Director, wow. Oh man, I really don't pay attention. I don't really pay attention to directors. To be honest, I'd like to direct it.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Best choice, probably. Like, yeah. I know this. I don't care about someone else's vision or what their interpretation is. Newton,
the reason I would like to do TV is because first, TV has a less of a stigma than it did before. Because I'm not sure if you guys, I'm not sure how old you guys are, but back in the days, if you were a movie star, you never did TV. Like once you hit the movies, you like if you appeared on a TV series, that meant your career as a movie star was going downhill, right? Like they I don't know if you ever noticed, but they never ever went from doing movies to a TV series. But now it's flipped. You have movie stars actually doing TV series, or actually appearing in TV series. So that kind of blows my mind, and that's a really big shift if you think about it. The fact that just maybe like a decade ago, actors they would be like, oh, what appearing Netflix? No, Netflix movie. No, this. I'm, Denzel Washington. That will never happen. Or, look, Will Smith did a Netflix
Yeah, Will
movie.
Smith did one, and I thought it was a pretty awesome movie. I mean, I'll say this, I would have liked it that much more if I could have saw it on the big screen, but it's still cool just to see that, like, oh yeah, and Brad Pitt did one too on Netflix. So go figure. There's the two biggest actors doing Netflix.
Yeah, so that's crazy. So I think the whole TV series thing is gotten a lot more respect in terms of storytelling. So based on that and the fact that you can kind of stretch out the storytelling as opposed to limit yourself to just only like a couple of hours for a movie, I would definitely make Crescent City Monsters a TV series.
Now to add on,
especially with something like Showtime or HBO, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, the network used to matter. Like, before it was like, show, AMC. Who's going to watch a movie on AMC? But then, The Walking Dead came out and AMC blew up. So now it almost doesn't even matter which network you appear in. You could appear in the Food Network. You could blow up.
Now I'm really curious what the CW Crescent City Monsters would be. I'm sorry, Spencer, go ahead.
Oh, that's actually an interesting one too, where it's just all a bunch of pretty actors being like, "There's monsters around, watch out, guys." Let me stroke my hair real quick.
The Grunch are really good looking.
And everybody's sleeping with each other because it's CW. It's like at some point, after 3 or 4 seasons, everybody's going to be sleeping with each other at some point. It's just how it's going to happen.
That's hilarious.
CW is really like one of the only networks that, like, if you're on the CW network, it literally changes like kind of like your tone. Like you literally have to fit into the CW tone. It's not like other ones where it's like, oh, okay, that kind of looks like that could have went on anybody's network. And it's like, no, CW has its own specific look. But what I was going to tie on is now, okay, if you had a TV series, would you want it to be live action or animation?
Definitely live action. Because like I said, I like to direct it myself. So, and I know you could direct animated movies, but I'd definitely love to direct live action instead.
I know that's how I feel. It's like if Pizza Boys, it's like I would love to just direct episodes, because I mean, like, I write it like a sitcom, so I feel like it could either go as like almost like in that kind of movie comedy, but if it was a sitcom, I feel like you could work it really well there. Have you ever had any guys come up to you and saying they want to write a screenplay based off of your comic?
No. I've had people interested in shopping my story for TV series.
Like, I literally had one time I had an email from like 2 people that were like, "Oh, this guy wants to, do a screenplay for Pizza Boys." It's like, what? Screenplay? Like, that seems kind of goofy. I mean, like, it was like, and I remember I just asked him questions. I'm like, okay, is this guy just like hunting around or whatnot? And it's like, oh, he literally read the book, and it was up by like issue 3 at this point. And I thought it was kind of like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, like how like people can like look at your story and say, oh wow, this is a great story. Hey, I want to make it a movie. I want to make it a screenplay. But really, their goal is they're just kind of basing whatever they produce on your story, right? So it might not be exactly what you wrote, So that whole process I find kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Because I've seen movies where it's like based on such and such, and I'm like, oh wow, this was based on a comic book. Oh wow, this was based on a book. And you go back and read the comic book or book, and you're like, the movie was nothing like the comic book.
Yeah, that weird adaptation line is always the thing where it's just somebody, they just take it, and maybe that's what they got out of it. You never really can tell. But sometimes it always kind of bothers me when they just sort of use something's namesake, and then they just, they're like, whatever, it's like, we're going to use the name because it's got, a slight built-in audience, but we can just do whatever we want now with it. And that's always kind of a little bit obnoxious. Not saying that you can't make something cool that's different, but still.
That being said, the last movie I can think that really did that, and I'm not going to lie, it's kind of a guilty pleasure. It's not even like a great or amazing movie, but for the reason I kind of enjoy it. And not in a shitty, cynical kind of way either. Wanted, bring it back to Mark Miller, because the comic, or I think it's been a long time since I read it. I want to say in the comic they're a team of supervillains or something like that. But in the movie, they're like, we're assassins that curve bullets. Oh, you are? Oh, I thought that was like the ability of the one guy, but everybody has that here. Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing. Like, oh, okay. Why do you do it? Yarn tells us to. Like, oh, okay.
Well, it's not saying that you can't take something and really change it and not still have something good, but just different, But it is kind of like if you were like a hardcore fan of Wanted, I could see it being like, oh man, it's nothing like it.
Yeah, because it looks so. I mean, if you look, it's been a long time since I read it. I don't remember it that well. I remember I liked it, but I remember it looked like Blade Runner, or with aliens and all that kind of stuff. And you see the movie, it's like modern day shit. They're just curving bullets, so it's just like see nothing like the show or the book.
Well, Newton, I kind of want to ask here. Okay, so we got the Kickstarter going, and what we got 12 days left on it, or something like that.
Let's see. 12 days.
So 12 days, and
actually no, 11 days. 11 days.
Okay, yeah. So we got 11 days. By the time this thing's up, it'll probably be about 10 days, but. So at least there's still time to go out there and pre-order it, and you just gotta type Crescent City Monsters in. I think it appears like in any search engine. Kickstarter's like the top one, but if not, you just go into Kickstarter and search for it. Real easy to find. But after you get the Kickstarter kind of going, what's sort of like your next kind of goals for Crescent City Monsters? I mean, granted, I'm assuming issue 2. But are you going to take it and kind of like submit it anywhere? Like, let's just say we've been talking about Image and Dark Horse and so on, like places like that or anything?
No, so I'm going to try to keep it independent as long as possible. I mean, I could still keep it independent, have it published by an indie publisher, but I should say I want to keep it close to heart as much as possible. So I'll keep it, host the same way I have it now, host it on my website, where everybody can go see it. I'm not going to move it over to Webtoons or anything like that. I'm just going to keep it on my site. Because this is something that I really just fell in love with, and then I've fallen in love with the fans, so it's something that I think that has a lot of potential. So I just want to keep it close to me. I'm not gonna put it on any other platform. I'm just gonna keep it to myself. I'm gonna try to publish everything myself. My ultimate goal, what I would really like is I don't want to even do a chapter 2. The next thing I want to print is just the graphic novel that would just end a story arc. If I could do that, that'd be great. But that might take some time, and I'm not really a patient guy, so I might, there's a good chance that there may be a chapter 2 instead of a graphic novel. But if Gian and I can bang out, 80 pages in the next 12 months, look out for a graphic novel.
Well, that'd be pretty sweet just to have that just ready and rocking. And the nice thing about keeping it just like literally independently published is one, like you do collect more money that way. There's no middleman. It's all you. You have 100% control over it. Nobody's going to be like, well, let me tell you, I think this cover would look a little bit better if it had a clown on it. What do you think? It's like, whoa, there's no clowns in the story. Yeah, but clowns are in, didn't you see that It movie? It's like, whoa, that's not what we're going for. But
kids like the Joker.
Yeah, kids like the Joker, But so you do, there is something to be said about keeping it like 100% indie is you have 100% control. The profits all come to you. There's nobody in between, nobody throwing in their 2 cents. And it's, I look at it this way. It's like, it's doing well. It's not like it's one of those ones, like if you kind of are at the point where you're like, man, this thing's starting to like dig a hole into me financially and so on. Like, what's my next option? I feel then you kind of want to go like, let's pull a publisher out and let's see if you can try it. But since it looks like it's going well, you got tons of fans so far. I mean, I just look at how that Kickstarter already went, and it's only going to climb even farther, I feel, as it keeps going on. I think as the word spread along, and anybody who's read it, I think passes along to their other comic book friends. So I think, if anything, it's working out great.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. I totally agree. And another reason why I'll keep it indie is I really like the business part of it too. So I know some creators, artists and writers, they really don't like doing the marketing, going out to the cons and all that, constantly. And independent publishers provide them a way of getting marketing done, and they still focus on their story and artwork, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is great, because a lot of people really aren't into that whole business and marketing part. But I like that. I really enjoy that part, even though it's super duper hard and frustrating. It's still something that I don't mind doing and that I really like. Plus you learn how to handle money. You learn how to handle your brand. The two most important things. So I don't mind handling the business part of it.
Well, then it's like the more you learn about it, just the easier it'll become as time goes on too. So it's like what's hard at first will become, moderately easier as it goes on. So is that also the next goal too, is kind of like to start doing the con circuit and just hitting places up? Since now you got issue 1, you can have it in print, be like, boom, here it is. Come check it out. Come grab a copy.
Yeah. Oh man, I don't know. It's like, I'm not sure if I want to do, people have recommended that I do, at least I should try to do a few cons, but it doesn't look like I'm made for cons, like sitting there all day waiting for somebody to come to my table. I don't know if I'm built for that. But I mean, people do it all the time, so maybe it might not be as bad as I think it is. But that's something I would consider.
They definitely stop by for your work, because some of the work we've been to a couple of cons, and this isn't me bringing down other people, but Crescent City Monsters is more interesting than some of the stuff we've seen at cons that have a line. So,
thanks, man.
Oh, sure thing.
Yeah, I just think it's one of those ones. If you just I think the key thing to do is just get a couple of big old posters behind you, and there's no way that no one's gonna stop by to come take a look at your book. So I think you should try it out anyways, because they are kind of fun in a weird way. They're time consuming, and they always cost a little bit more money than you think they would. But I look at it kind of like it's a good way to sort of advertise just that extra way, beyond just the social media and so on. You can maybe meet some people face to face, meet some other comic book creators too, and other artists, and kind of like, pass business cards back and forth and kind of help each other out. So there's something to be said about the Comic Cons, I feel like this day and age, you might be able to get away by never doing them, but at the same time, it wouldn't hurt to do them. And as I said, I think your books would sell like hotcakes.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate that.
And if you combined it with hotcakes, then you'd have a real
side business.
Real side business going there.
You'd be surprised how many vendors don't have like food there. So if you just brought that with you,
Yeah, the last Comic Con we went to, there was no food. You had to go venture off into town to get something.
Really? There was no concession stand or anything like that?
No, well, I think their idea was that you would go walk downtown and get food, but if you were, like, working the con, you pretty much were like, well, I guess we're not going anywhere then. I mean, at least with me and Ryan, there's a couple of us, so, like, we don't have that problem that, like, if you're a single person, you're like, well, I can't leave my booth now. What if hoodlums come by?
Like, early, 1990s, like... hoodlums from like a beat 'em up video game, backwards cap, all Beastie Boyed out.
Exactly. You don't know when those guys are going to show up, so you got to be careful. But beyond that, though, it's like, it was kind of weird, but no, I think you should do it. I think it'd be fun, and I think as long as you just had a couple of like either a banner or something to just let people see it from the distance, there's no way they would not come up and want to talk to you.
Yeah. I'll think about it. I mean. Like you were saying, just the part where you get to kind of socialize with other creators, that part seems cool.
Yeah, because every single time we've done it, like, this is the sad part, though, is it seems like every con we've been to, there's only been, like, maybe 2 or 3 other comic book creators there, but all of them have been great people, fun to talk to, they got cool work, and you get to swap stories and so on, and kind of get an idea of, like, what they're doing and how their stuff goes, but still just fun in itself.
Yeah, I definitely gotta check it out. I'll probably maybe do since I'm in New York, maybe next year I'll do a New York Comic Con.
Well, you probably got a bunch of cool like places you can kind of go to. You probably got the New York Comic Con, but I bet you there's a bunch of small ones that kind of appear around it. And I'd even say, like, I tell this to people, like, I'm like, even like something like anime cons, I know people go like, well, my stuff's not an anime. It's like, yeah, but anime con is really the same thing as Comic Con. It's got more anime than comics, but those are even sometimes fun ones to try, and they cost a lot less, and sometimes it's amazing how crowded they are too.
Yeah. I've thought about it. I was like, there should be a lot of overlap between the fan base.
Yeah, and then you also got the horror cons, and so I mean, it's a whole market and world in itself. But I just don't, I can't see how they wouldn't do well there. You know, if anything.
Yeah, and the cool thing about New York is they have a couple of big comic comics, and that's a pretty big shop right there. So like, a lot of guys come and sign books there, and so even if I could do some promotional things there, that'd be cool.
Oh yeah, so I mean, it's just the old next wave of business. It's not just creating another issue or a graphic novel. It's like, oh, how do I expand now, and what's the next avenues to go to? But just stacking them up, I think that's just totally the way to go. And yeah, just cool stuff all around.
Very cool.
But just to let everybody know, I know we said you could look that up on Kickstarter, but Newton, where else can they find everything of yours, and what's the easiest stuff to do to get a hold of you, get a hold of a comic, you know, grab a physical copy and all that fun stuff?
Well, so let's start off with the webcomic itself. So if you're interested in reading the webcomic, it's online for free. Chapter 1 is online for free. You can go to dreamfurycomics.com. That's spelled DREAMFURY comics.com. And you can catch me on social media. Tag name is Dream Fury Comics, both on Twitter and Instagram. And right now, if you want to get me, check out my Kickstarter page, you can just go to my Instagram or Twitter profile accounts, and the link is right there. Or you can go to crescentcitymonsters.com, and it'll redirect you to the Kickstarter page. Or like Scott mentioned, you can just type in Crescent City Monsters in Kickstarter, and it'll actually appear. Those are the ways you can reach me and read my webcomic.
Well, cool. I'll make sure to put all those links too in the little description down below the podcast to make it even easier to get to all that fun stuff. But other than comics, like, you got any other like little projects going on or anything fun as we kind of wrap up the show here?
Just City Monsters. I have a couple other comics that I'm working on, but I haven't really talked about them much. But since I'm almost getting ready to wrap up Crescent City Monsters Kickstarter, I might as well start marketing those now. And there's a story that I'm working on with another writer, a co-writer, Thomas Gormans, working on a interesting version of Lee Harvey Oswald. So the story is about it's a spin on Lee Harvey Oswald and the assassination of JFK and how and why it happens. So I'm going to keep it at that because I don't want to say too much because we're still working. And then I'm also working on another story based on Hercules. It's kind of a reimagination of Hercules. So it's going to be interesting. It's a twist. I like to twist things around, so it's a twist on Hercules, and it's going to be based. They're going to be a few historical characters, actual historical characters who are actually main characters in the story too. So that I'm looking forward to getting that story done too. So those are the two other stories that everyone kind of should look out for. I'm trying to like spread myself across different genres. Some people recommend that you stay in one genre because then you kind of known as the horror person, and then you can go there and spill into other genres. But I'd rather just spread myself and just make some really good, interesting stories.
Well, both those sound pretty awesome right there.
Thanks.
Oh yeah, those sound great. And I personally think that spreading yourself amongst multiple genres, I always thought that's the way to go. I even think it doesn't matter what it is, whether you're doing comic books, whether you're doing movies, whether you're doing even music. I always think it's interesting when you can see a band and it's like, oh, they're not just one locked in genre. They literally can do all kinds of stuff and it works. It's okay. It's. So I think it's great to have a couple other ideas. I know me and Ryan keep talking about a couple books that we plan on not really probably drawing ourselves just because, there's just not enough time to do both Pizza Boys and Into the Dirt and draw another book. But we'll write a script that we've had for a while and then try to get somebody to kind of draw it. And then at least we can have multiple books kind of coming out simultaneously together and have that kind of fun stuff too.
Yeah.
But cool, dude. I'm glad you came on the show and got to finally talk. I know we talked about this for years about coming on the podcast and everything like that. And I was like, well, once that Kickstarter comes, we'll just do it and it'll all tie in nicely and hopefully boost a little bit more extra sales and all that fun stuff. But till then, you can always check out oldmanorange.com for more comics, podcasts, animations, movies, and more. And I'm Spencer Scott Holmes.
And I'm Ryan Dunnigan. And Newton, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, well, thanks for having me on. It was fun talking to you guys.
Oh, yeah.
It was fun talking to you, man.
And then, before we all leave, I want to say, this is Newton, you're going to be the first guy for this. We're doing our hashtag countdown to 400 because we're coming up on our 400th episode, and this is 380.
Wow, congratulations. That's big. I mean, some podcasts never make it up to 100 episodes.
Yeah.
That's huge.
We're very persistent.
We are. We're like the one thing. We might not be the greatest podcast out there, but boy, we'll do an episode every week for you, no matter what. You got that guarantee.
We're the cockroach of podcasts. They may not want us, but we show up anyway. We're hard to get rid of.
Yeah, literally our last.
Nah, you guys are good.
Thanks, dude. Our last episode was our 6-year anniversary episode too. So.
Wow, congratulations.
So we've trucked along, so that's what we're doing. We're doing countdown to 400. We'll try to make each episode feel kind of special, and then, just by having a guest, not just, I guess not just me and Ryan. We'll have somebody else kind of more interesting to talk about too, and we'll talk comics and fun stuff, but thanks, Newton, for coming on. And then everybody, make sure you grab Crescent City Monsters, buy a copy, get a physical copy. That will make your day when you get that physical copy in the mail. I actually was holding off on reading the book, and I only read it because we were going to do the podcast. Like, I stopped at like page 15. I'm like, I'm just going to wait. I want to see it in physical copy, and that's how I'm going to experience it. Even though I did kind of spoil myself, I guess, by just reading it up just so we can do the episode. But it will be so awesome, especially if you didn't even touch the comic book and you just looked in like, the artwork looks cool, that story sounds neat, and you grab yourself a physical book and that comes in and you open it up and it's just magic in your hands. Grab one of those, go to the Kickstarter. There's a bunch of other cool stuff on there too. Like, not only can you get, the digital and the physical copy, but it looks like you got stickers and all kinds of like bonus items and cool stuff like that.
Yeah. There's a whole bunch of cool things. In fact, surprisingly, the most expensive reward tier that we had already is sold out.
Oh my gosh!
I got to go in and create some more top tiers. I think I'm gonna create some tiers that kind of go into the hundreds of dollars to help out the funding.
Did you have any T-shirts? I can't remember if you did or not. I felt like I might have got one if was there, but.
No, I didn't get T-shirts. What I try to do is I try to keep the rewards as simple as possible because this is my first Kickstarter, and I wanted to make sure everything went smoothly, especially the fulfillment. So it's all really just based on the artwork and the book and like small physical things. So like books, stickers, postcards, things like that. That's easy to package and won't take up a lot of bulk. And I wanted to keep it on that level because even with T-shirts, I mean, it sounds simple, but you still got to order the T-shirt design, get different sizes, and so I wanted to make sure fulfillment went as smooth as possible. So I try to keep it as simple as possible. So a lot of the rewards are based on that.
Well, yeah, and that's probably the smarter way to do it, because really probably the easier way to do T-shirts would be to do them later down the line and just do them as like a Teespring or a T-Chip or one of those sites where they can do all the printing for you and so on, and it's just like the sizing, and it's not like you got that inventory sit in your house like if you're doing Kickstarter and so on, but
Right, exactly.
But other than that, though, make sure you guys go there. Check out Crescent City Monsters. It's totally awesome. Like, guaranteed, like, one of the best indie comics you can possibly read. Grab that today. And then other than that, though, we are out of here.
Later, folks.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks again for listening to the Old Man Orange podcast. Be sure to check out oldmanorange.com for more podcasts, comics, animations, videos, and a whole lot more. You can easily support the show by buying something from one of our Amazon links on the website or in the show's description itself. Doesn't cost you a penny, but every single thing you buy from there just by using that link to take you to Amazon helps us out a bit. You can also really help the show out, though, by spreading the word the good old-fashioned way and rate and review us on all the sites that you find this podcast. Anything from iTunes to Podbean, to Newgrounds, YouTube, you name it, any little bit helps. Give a sub and share it to your friends, family, any jamoke you see out on the street, you let them know about Old Man Orange Podcast. And be sure to check out the Old Man Orange comic book Pizza Boys on both Amazon and Comixology. Till then, we'll see you some other time.